Hello and welcome to another thrilling episode of Connecting with Kinetic. I'm your host, Jake, and today I'll be talking with Patrick from Shapeshifter, one of Kinetic's wonderful security partners. How are you, Patrick?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I really couldn't do this show without you. Otherwise, it would just be me talking to myself.
You.
So
yeah.
Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see that. My first question is a bit of a two-prong, a double prong. Luckily not three prongs, because then we'd have a pitchfork. So it's a tuning fork question. What is your role at Shapeshifter, and can you tell me a bit more about its function within the Flare ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm the CEO and the founder of Shapeshifter. In terms of the Flare ecosystem, we really got plugged in through you guys, through Kinetic, and so our connection to Flare is by is through doing these risk assessments and building up the infrastructure for the risk analysis for Kinetic. And it's been really interesting to kind of learn about some of the idiosyncrasies of Flare, some of the kind of some of the things that make Flare different. But it really was Kinetic who got me plugged into the Flare ecosystem.
Well, now I'm flattered. I mean, it kind of seems like that was a leading question or something. I mean, it is Valentine's Day when we're recording this. I just if there's any lucky protocols out there, looking for a match. So to get a bit more into the personal arena, how long have you personally been in the Web3 space, and how did that journey begin?
It's a great question. I'll give you some of my background, and we can go back further if we want. But I have an academic background, so I did a PhD in economics and finance, and worked on some very technical research for building quantitative trading strategies. I taught MFEs and MBAs for a little while. I then went to work at a startup that a friend of mine, who also did his PhD at the same program I did at UCLA, which is the business school, and the PhD is in finance at the business school there. And so I went and worked with him at his startup, and it was, we were building these quantitative trading strategies, but we were also building a lot of the infrastructure he needed to run a startup. And so that, it's funny, when I was in my PhD, I really cut my teeth using tools like R, doing a lot of statistical analysis. And then when I was helping to build out some of the infrastructure for my friend's company, I got my hands dirty with all these other kind of general purpose programming languages. And I just became very kind of passionate about what was possible to build, particularly like in this intersection between, financial modeling and then some of the decisions about architecture design. The implications for kind of market microstructure there were just really, really fascinating to me. So while I was at that startup, we started building some friends of mine and I started building some smart contracts to implement an options trading protocol. And we went to a hackathon at Cornell called IC3, which is a great hackathon. It's a great group of people who show up for that. And we presented kind of an early version of this, and we were just encouraged to stick with it, and parlayed that into a venture that became Arrow Markets, which is an option trading platform on Avalanche. And that's when I left the startup and went into Web3, and that was right after COVID, I think maybe 21 or something. And so I've been in the space since then. Had very my experience. We learned so much when we were building Arrow, so that was an extremely important experience for us. And then I started kind of pivoting into, being able to do, more things and doing some advisory and consulting work. And that's where Shapeshifter came in, and just, through Shapeshifter just kind of evolved. And we've just been picking up more projects. And of course, our strength is directly related to my background. So again, it's just kind of this intersection between the financial modeling. So thinking about risk, thinking about asset price dynamics, and then also thinking about how to build infrastructure that kind of makes doing those types of analyses easy, right? And so that's also what I've been doing for Kinetic. But so maybe a little bit of a long-winded answer, but that was kind of my route into Web3.
I'm just glad you didn't say 2014. Like everybody's like, oh yeah, I was there with Satoshi in the beginning, and just
no.
How are all of you? How do all of you guys show up at the same time? So I appreciate that. I also got into it about 2020, 2021. Which I guess I'm basically, we're so old now to all the young crypto whippersnappers out there.
That's right.
What would you say is the most annoying thing about Web3, in your opinion?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I would typically have said that I feel like I think historically I would have said there are kind of two main strands to Web3. And one is kind of a more playful, like meme coin, and maybe more immature, more degen-y for sure. And then there's kind of another strand, which is more technical about, actually improving the rails of the financial system. And I, for a long time, I kind of felt like those were very much in conflict. And I think there are kind of obvious ways where they are in conflict. And so if you had asked me this 6 months ago or a year or 18 months ago, I for sure would have just said meme coins. But I've actually, they've grown on me a little bit. I think some of the stuff, like, I think meme coins are capturing a real cultural phenomenon. There's kind of a real distinct type of behavior that goes into everything we see surrounding meme coins, and I don't think we should write that off. So some of the kind of the silliness and the immaturity, that might have been my answer in the past, but I'm not sure I have a good answer at this point because I have grown to appreciate kind of the cultural significance of meme coins. I think there is a real case you could make that these are distinct markets. This isn't the same as a market for a security where we want to trade tokens that, are effectively, have some value accrual mechanism like a stock. And you want to make sure that value accrual mechanism is very clear for investors and so forth. And meme coins are just a different phenomenon. It's people who voluntarily, come together and express their enthusiasm around a particular idea, and it's of course not just the idea, it's the name, it's the images and so forth. And there's a whole culture around it, and people come and voluntarily, put money into the coins because they want to participate in the culture. And that's a different type of market than a securities market, and so I've kind of come to think this. That being said, there are, if you look at Pump Fun or something, there's rug pulls all day. There is an enormous amount of bad behavior still in the meme coin space, but I have come to appreciate it as a true phenomenon, and maybe it's not the part I dislike as much as I used to about Web3.
Let me ask you this: have you ever been at a social gathering and someone finds out that you're involved in crypto in some way, and you just have an absolutely heinous conversation with that person? Has that ever happened to you?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually going to an academic conference at the end of the month, and I'm very curious to see what the response will be among academic economists, right? Because I think, typically the attitude, because of things like meme coins and because also of just the scam, right? It's because meme coins are kind of correlated with scams. So, you look at FTX, you have all these kind of headlines. And so people who aren't digging deeply into what's possible with the technology, it's very possible they have a very bad kind of image in their head about what crypto is. And so, and I think that has been the case at a lot of kind of legacy institutions, so academia and traditional finance and so forth. So I really am curious to see. That said, I think we've come a long way. And I noticed on this conference agenda that there were multiple other people and people who, so I'm not an academic, but there are people on there who are tenured professors who are actually presenting about crypto, like presenting papers on crypto. And so this is a little bit of a change, I think. And so I'm hoping, to your question, I'm hoping the frequency of those conversations is going down.
Yeah, because they're tough. They're tough. I don't tell anyone what I do.
Oh, you have to read the crowd. Sometimes just say fintech.
Oh, right. No, I just say I have an internet job. That's usually enough. I have a job on the internet.
It's true.
It's technically factual. They can't attack me, but luckily that combination of words, the amount of interest in their eyes fades. So we abandoned that thread. I saw a post on X that it's a very famous platform. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was actually from the Shapeshifter X account teasing some kind of AI agent functionality with Kinetic. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I remember, talking with Christine and Lindsay when I first started getting plugged into Kinetic, and and we were talking about the risk assessments, and we just kind of had a conversation about the direction the market is going, and I think in terms of if you look at kind of tech innovation, if you also just look at kind of it's mostly tech innovation. There's some kind of organizational innovation that I think is probably also relevant. I think we're going more and more toward automation for the types of services that you guys need from something like Shapeshifter. And I don't think automation is, when I say automation, it's a matter of degree, right? It's not that we're talking about it's all humans and then suddenly there's no humans. But I think more and more of the things that the humans can do, we can automate, right? And there still needs to be a human in the loop and so forth. And so, what I teased on the Twitter was kind of the manifestation of this idea, and kind of trying to make this trade-off as optimally as we could. So if you use there's still a human in the loop. If I'm tasked with doing risk monitoring for Kinetic, I can interact with this AI agent. I can ask it. It has access to. So originally it had access just to price APIs, so it could kind of call a bunch of APIs directly. I think the better architecture for that is we build a database that just keeps updating the data that the agent needs access to, and then the agent just queries the database. I think that's a little bit simpler. But then, as someone who is tasked with monitoring the risk at Kinetic, I can interact with this agent assistant. It can look up all the information I need. It can tell me what the current parameters are. It can tell me what the current prices are. It can also run all of these functions that I've built in Python to do, myself and my team in Python to do these analyses. So there are a bunch of kind of statistical tests and quantitative analyses you could do if you're thinking about, okay, given the current prices, given the current parameter values, what happens if I change the parameter values a little bit? How can we assess the value of that change? And the agent has access to all of those functions, right? So it can do all of this analysis very quickly for you and report back. And it can also, you can run it on an autonomous mode. So it can also do things like if there are things that are too extreme that happen. So it's just kind of regularly monitoring the data as it comes in. If something very surprising happens, it could even auto pause the platform, right? You could give it that authority. Of course, you need to to do that, then the protocol needs to share some keys with the agent, and there are a few different ways to do that, an environment file, or so there are some trade-offs there, but you can give it the power, for example, while it's going through and running these assessments to pause the platform. Certainly, at the very least, what it can do is notify kind of the human operator. So the point of all of this is to bring down the amount of work that the human has to do to stay on top of the risk monitoring task for something like Kinetic.
Right. And I guess that kind of AI and human working together can also increase the amount of predictive events that can be observed, right? Like you can use your own experience and also have the agent be thinking about exploring different possibilities that might happen.
Exactly. So you kind of get you get kind of a redundancy layer by allowing the agent and the human to interact in this way, and you don't rely entirely on either of them, right? And so you get some kind of so I think that's right.
I said something smart. Personally, I'm gonna get a little gold sticker for myself later. So yeah, if you see me in a future video wearing a big gold sticker, you'll know where it came from. Kind of zooming out, what are you most excited about regarding the future of AI? A lot of stuff's already happened, but I feel like there's still a lot Well, certainly refinement, but also a lot
Yeah.
of things in general that can be rolled out?
That's a great question. So I have been, I mean, I've been over a period of years fairly skeptical of what people call AI, and I've been on record being fairly skeptical. But I think, and this was particularly true kind of in the pre-Chat GPT era. You know, what people called AI then, I mean, really it was machine learning, which is really statistics and optimization, which are extremely powerful tools that technical people should, engineers should know how to use. But we don't need to give them different names and pretend there's a bunch of hype. But when I started playing with these circuits for building AI agents, and the way the agent circuits work is it's interactive with you have some generative, you have an LLM and you interact with it. You go back and forth between the LLM and some deterministic computations or an API call or whatever. And there are tools to make this easy. So there are people who've been doing a lot of hard work, like LangChain is a great example. So LangChain is a library in Python that makes integrating tools with the LLMs very easy. And so as I started building these out, I realized that the ratio of what can be done to what's been done, I mean, the ratio of what's been done to what can be done is almost zero at this point. So I think almost everything that we have yet to see in terms of applications that use AI agents, we haven't seen it yet. So, but that's why, I mean, we interact with a bunch of different builder teams, a bunch of different developers. And so we're always chatting on Telegram or hopping on quick calls to kind of bounce ideas off each other. And everyone is building agents. And the reason is because of there are so many new opportunities to build new circuits at such a low cost, right? And this hasn't been the case before. I think, maybe people who were way ahead of the game started doing this a year ago or so. But remember, we had to wait for some of these LLMs to, the kind of the ability to interact with these LLMs. So all of the kind of developer tools, we had to wait for these to kind of be built out. I mean, ChatGPT was about 2 years ago, right, when it first came out. And so there's a lag period. You have to wait for all of these, LangChain wasn't there. You needed to build all of this infrastructure up. And now we're at a point where anyone can build agents. And I actually wrote a Substack describing what agents actually are, if that's helpful to anyone. I'll just say quickly again, an agent is just an application that uses both LLMs and deterministic computations, including things, and also other computations like API calls, right? And so when you give the application access to these API calls, sometimes you need credentials. So you add the user's credentials to an environment file. Now all of a sudden this application acts like an agent, right? But it's just a program that kind of goes back and forth between the LLM and some other computations or API calls. And so, but again, I mean, everyone is building with these. The cost is very low. The kind of the number and variety of things you can do is extremely high. So I'm very bullish about it.
I will ask you this though. I've been waiting. We've been talking about self-driving cars for a long time, and I don't want to touch the steering wheel. I want that steering wheel far away from me. And I've been waiting for like just getting a cube with wheels for a long time, because personally I hate driving. I hate it. And living in America, you have to drive a lot. And personally, I find it obnoxious. When are we going to get to a point where AI can make me a sandwich?
So this is also a very interesting question. I think what we've learned is the physical things are much harder to have the AI do. So robotics are much harder. Self-driving is much harder. But having the AI do the computer programming for you or make a bunch of API calls for you is extremely easy, right? And so it's funny, if you look back, people didn't see this coming. If you look back 4 years ago or so, 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was this big narrative, and it was like, okay, all of trucking is going to be self-driving. So if you remember, there was this meme. It was like, truckers should learn to code or something. Mm-hmm. That was terrible advice, right? Because the trucking industry is fine. AI has not built these physical driving machines, right? And the robotics, as I said, all of these kind of physical world applications are lagging way behind in AI. But some of these kind of professional, like white collar applications, programming, paralegal, stuff like that, it's way ahead. It's way ahead. So think about this. Think about what bad advice that was, telling truckers to learn to code, right? I mean, but to your point, there is a distinction here. There is a distinction
right.
between the physical applications and these kind of like, professional white collar applications, these technical applications. And it's those applications where I think these AI agents are going to explode.
Yeah. It's like the AI has trouble with our world, which, I can't blame them. It's pretty complicated. Even moving is pretty difficult. So I understand they might take a while to catch up. I'm just hoping eventually there's a sandwich making machine.
Yeah.
Where I can tell them to make me a sandwich. That's the dream. That and being able to go to Taco Bell just by stepping into a thing and like being half asleep. The more time I can spend basically half asleep and not doing anything, that's the dream. People are like, oh, WALL-E, it was such a realistic dystopia. Dystopia. Put me in the chair, baby. Plug me in. I don't care.
That's
do
hilarious.
it. Just have all the butlers. I'll have all the AI butlers. I don't care. They'll be running things. They probably do a better job. Have you seen our world? They'll probably do a better job. I trust them. I trust them more.
That's hilarious. Yeah. This is a really good point, though. I mean, this distinction is really important. I mean, and people really got it wrong. These physical applications were touted years ago as being kind of the first wave of AI revolution, and none of it happened. Mm-hmm. It turned out to be much, much harder problems, right? But then some of these other things like using AI coding assistants and, these just took off. I think I've said this to my team right now. I think there's probably a subset of people. I don't know. It's just anecdotal. I'd say 5 to 10% of teams right now, developer teams are kind of way ahead of the rest because they're using these AI automation and assistance tools in the right ways. And so I think right now you have this very wide distribution in terms of the productivity of engineers. But I think as people catch up to how powerful these tools are, I think the average productivity of the working engineer is going to be much higher, right? It also means that maybe there's fewer. What's that? Yeah.
I mean, in hindsight, it makes sense that the AI, based on how it was created, would be able to solve those problems easier because that's its realm, right? But being like, okay, how do you take into account gravity, lighting, motion, perspective, balance? Those things are alien, right? So the amount of training that would have to go into making a sandwich is really difficult.
Yeah. Well, I also think the cost of it, I mean, a big factor here, and I wrote about this in my Substack as well, a big factor is what are the costs of a mistake, right? So these models are not doing any formal reasoning or anything like that, right? It's remarkable how much it mimics reasoning in some cases, but it is not actually doing any formal reasoning. So yeah, I mean, it's quite
copying
surprising.
Homework really well.
Yeah. But oh yeah, so what I was going to say is, I mean, like if you're doing a self-driving car, the cost of mistake is very high, right? You're talking about human life. If you're building a sandwich, that'll probably come sooner if there's really a demand for it, right? Just because the cost of the mistake isn't as high. And I think the same is true in these other applications. So you see these agent applications flourishing in areas like sales or entertainment, right? Like AI influencers and stuff, and also to some extent crypto, but much less in like, banking or something, right? Or and the reason is because the cost of the mistakes are high, right? So it's still true whether it's the physical world of robotics or whether it's this virtual world where these agents are calling these APIs. The trade-off you have to make when you're building these circuits is that these models are not doing formal reasoning. They can make mistakes, and so you have to catch them. You have to build in layers to catch mistakes, and the more costly the mistakes are for a particular application, the more work you're going to have to put into building these kind of layers that catch them, right? And so that's why we're seeing a proliferation of these applications in areas where the cost of mistakes are not very high.
I will say, I don't know if you've noticed, because people said like, oh, AI is going to replace artists. And I always was like, maybe like bad artists. Maybe like stock images are going to go away, which, oh no, I don't have to license my stock image anymore of a hand holding a mug. Oh gosh, goodness. Those poor stock image licensing people.
I mean, it'd be much harder to replace a sculptor than a painter, probably. But that's, yeah.
I mean, well, I mean, the value, half of the painter's value is that he's a painter.
Yeah.
But I will notice I've seen so many bad AI art advertisements for local businesses. I don't know if you've noticed it. Just like a smoothie shop will open, it'll be some unholy abomination with like 15 arms. It'll be like a giant cup man, but his like pattern is also embedded in the palm tree next to him. Because there is a percentage of blindness to it, which I find very funny. Because like to me, it's like if I see AI art, I immediately know it's AI art. And major brands I've noticed have even started using a lot of AI art. And it's just like they probably can't tell the difference. But boy, I sure can. And it does not fill me. It's the lighting. It does not fill me with confidence.
Yeah.
Hopefully again, it gets better.
What's that?
I said hopefully it gets better, but it's all got that same like sheen to it.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you know, I've plugged DALL-E into some of these circuits and had some of these, you know, and had it spit out some images. And I agree, that's lagging behind too. You wouldn't want to use those in production in most contexts. And so, yeah, I think there is kind of you know, there's a split between where these models can be most effective and where they're going to be lagging behind. And you know, there are a few reasons, and one, like I said, is safety, and that's a big one. That's, you know, kind of on my on my radar when I'm thinking about building these circuits and making these trade-offs. I mean, even in crypto, if you give the thing access to private keys, you have to have some redundancy layers there, right? Like it can make mistakes. You need to have extra checks. But then, like you're saying, there are other areas where it's just lagging behind. I mean, it's not just the safety question. The technology is lagging expectations on self-driving cars, and also the technology is just kind of manifestly not competitive in terms of generating these images. So, yeah, but it's moving really fast.
Space.
Yeah.
Everybody's predictions for how things are going to go just seem to always be wrong. It's like, oh, I mean, it's going to replace artists.
Yeah.
It's like, no, not really. Well, at least programming jobs are safe. Ugh.
Yeah. No, the truckers should learn to code. I feel like that's just, because that was something that was being parroted for, you know, a year and a half or something. I mean, it was a very sustained message, and it's so funny how backwards it was.
The one thing I will say that I hate AI for is what it has done to articles and what it has done to search engines. Unusable. I can't read an article anymore. I'm just like, okay, no one wrote this. Nobody cared about this. about this.
Like a news article, yeah, you just got to go to the. I mean, it's true if you're just reading articles on the internet. I mean, if you go to Wall Street Journal or something, their journalists are still doing all the writing, and so I mean, there are some standards, maybe, you know, but I agree, and I can tell when an article is written by AI, and I stop reading it usually.
Well, yeah, because they never get to the point. They're like, due to the effect of the integrations, therefore, maybe like they takes like 30 sentences to get to like, you have to turn it off and turn it on again, buddy. Like if you want tech support, it's just like, you used to be able to get like a forum popping up. All the forums are dead. Now it's just AI generated articles that maybe sort of have something to do with your problem. And it's like reading a book. Just like, I just want to know what I have to click to make the buzzing stop, please. Like, oof.
Yeah. I mean, that being said, it is getting better quickly. So I encourage everyone on my team to use these tools, and I also even just encourage friends and family to use ChatGPT over Google search, to be honest. And so I think it's getting better, and I think it will. I think we're going in a direction where it just becomes more and more of a factor.
Yeah, no, I mean, Google search is rough. They're like, we've got AI summaries now too. I don't know if you've looked at them, but a lot of times they're just 100% wrong. Just
Really?
100%, because they're probably using their own search results, which are really, really bad now.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, Gemini. So I assume the Google search is using Gemini, and Gemini has some. A bunch of the models have these tools now too. But where I first became familiar, there's a code execution tool that Gemini has, and so not only can you ask it to write some code, you can ask it to run it and test it first, and do the iterations it needs to get it working before it sends you the output. Things are moving fast. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get to the sandwich. That's the dream. So if
people,
yeah.
Then you can have an AI make a sandwich while you ask the Kinetic AI how the risk is looking.
Yeah, as long can we make it so I don't have to move or speak?
You can just speak. Yeah, speak. Sure, speech after.
No, I don't want to have to speak either. Can we limit it to eye movement?
Neuralink.
Just no, drill the hole in my head, man. I'm ready. Let's let me transcend this mortal coil, please.
Have you seen those? Have you tried the smart glasses?
I have not. No, are they good?
I don't know. I haven't tried them either.
No.
Yeah.
No access. I mean, that is something that has been talked about, since 2010?
Yeah. Facebook has some. You can buy them. There's a Facebook Ray-Ban smart glasses that you can buy, but I think they're still very early. But I also think the AI integrations with those is because it can be voice activated and it can print the readout on the glass. It can print the response on the frame. So I don't know.
I wonder what the battery life's like.
I wonder too. Yeah.
20 minutes. Oh yes. Otherwise, you can have the upgraded model that might burn the Meta logo into the side of your head if it gets too hot.
Right. Perfect.
So for the wonderful people watching, if they want to know more about Shapeshifter, what's the best place to go? Where should they head?
They should head to Twitter @HexShapeshifter. And we also have a website, shapeshifter.builders.
And I've heard good things about this website.
Amazing. Well, you've seen a few iterations, I think. So
the current iteration I find is my favorite.
Beautiful. Hey, we're on the right track then.
So before we close this out, I like to ask my guests if they have any final thoughts, final summaries they'd like to share before we close this out. What do you think? No? Yes? Maybe?
I mean, I would just say, you asked initially about the Flare network, and I kind of got plugged in through Kinetic. I think there's some really interesting things there. There's a model that I had thought about with some people about 1.5 years ago, where you kind of just have a state machine that's able to basically print out the states of multiple different blockchains. And then you kind of use that for bridging, right? And other things. And I think it looks like Flare has something like that, some capability like that baked in, and it might not be being used for that right now, but that's something to me that I think maybe is very powerful and seems to be fairly not fully harnessed on Flare yet. So in terms of our side, we will be doing a little DD and looking under the hood at some of those capabilities on Flare, because I think there could be some really interesting applications there.
No, I mean, that's kind of an exciting thread to pursue. I'd like to thank you so much for your time, for coming on the show. And this has been another episode of Connecting with Kinetic.
Cheers.